Welcome back to another episode of Burning Branches Podcast. We're a group of guys who talk about some of the things that affect us in our daily life as, young Christian men, some of the things, the challenges that we face, some of the things that we can learn from, and who we're trying to grow into. And we want to extend a hand from our fellowship to you, the listener. We want you to be involved in this. And so just a quick introduction. We're going to be talking about God's grace and unmerited favor and how it affects our lives today. I am David.
Darius. Scott.
Christian here.
And I am Kenneth. It's good to be here, guys. Let's get to work.
We are excited to bring you this topic and to discuss and see what God has for us to learn today. And so, Kenny, can you kind of explain to us a situation where God really showed His grace and His favor to you, and what that meant to the building of your life?
God, I think this is something that I think all of us can expound on. So, for possibly 3, 4, 5 hours, because it's by the grace of God that I sit in this seat. It's by the grace of God that I have the ability to inhale and exhale and have a diastolic and systolic pressure, like the ability for my heart to beat.
I don't know what those words mean.
It's by the grace of God. When I think about grace, I think about the ability for God to number my days, the ability for God to just grant me a divine kindness towards someone that's not deserving. And I say I'm not deserving because I've been disobedient to Him. I've been I've been a disobedient child. He would grant me the grace, and I go back, God, I repent, I did this, and I go back to God, please, I repent, God. And then I'll go back and do it again. But I come back to Him, the prodigal son. He opens His arms up and gives me a hug. He always draws me in. And that's what I think when grace comes to mind. There's just so much dimensions and so much perspective on the word grace, favor, and kindness and mercy. There's so much perspective to draw out of. But personally, for me, I think the ability to be able to have air in my lungs, to have a heartbeat, the ability to see, the ability to have the power to hear things, to have auditory power, the ability to walk, the ability to do daily activities is the grace of God. That's what I think about when grace comes to mind. It's like the first thing that comes to my mind. Oh, I'm breathing. Oh, I woke up. That's the first. And before we go into life experiences that God showed so much grace and unmerited favor, the first thing I think about is just...
I want to kind of hone in on that because it's like when I was growing up,
right.
my dad would explain it to me this way. He would be talking about being in the presence of God. And he would say, man, if you were in the presence of God, just as you were right now, you'd just be struck dead. You couldn't exist in that space. Right. God is so holy. God is so just. God is so righteous. And I think about that sometimes. It's like we always want to press into the presence of God. And it's like, oh, okay, I want to be in the presence of God. I want to experience His holiness. But I'm a sinner. This body's terrible. This mind is terrible. And it keeps wanting to put me off track, and it keeps drawing me off track. But it's like, it's His grace and His mercy that He says, no, I'm going to cover you with my righteousness, and so that you can approach me in my presence. Wow. I was listening to some interesting thoughts this week about two things can't exist in the same space, right? And so God can't exist in the same space that something else is. I mean, He can. He's omnipresent. Yeah. But in order for His real presence to shine through, you have to make a space for that presence. Wow. And so He has to give you the grace to experience that presence. And there have been so many times in my life where I just was no good. I was absolutely terrible. I was in a bad mindset, a bad mentality, bad attitude, whatever, you name it, But God still had the grace to wink at that. Like He says in the Bible, He winked at that for a moment. And then so that He could then cover me with His grace and pull me into His love. Wow. And say, you know what? No, I still love you, son. I still love you. And I'm gonna choose to forget those things. I'm gonna provide the sacrifice for that so that you can have grace and favor. And I'll tell you, man, I have experienced some things in my life where, I should be dead. Honestly, I should be dead. There are 3 or 4 times in my life, 4 times in my life where I would not be standing here and breathing today if God hadn't seen fit to stop in that moment and say, no, I'm not going to let you die there. Right. And then I walk up completely unharmed, and I'm like, what just happened?
My God.
Now, when I think about God's grace, it's like each day I wake up, each day I go to bed, and it's like I know there are things that I missed. I know there are people I should have talked to, things that I should have gotten done. But something that the Lord's been teaching me is that His grace is available, and there's a reason that His grace is there. It's not just, there for when we sin. It's there for when we fall short. Like, sin is like, it means to fall short. And like, we're human. We're going to fall short. And sometimes there's going to be seasons where we just can't seem to get it right. But that's when we have to learn not to live in that sin, not to live in that moment or that state of falling, but to know that His grace is there so that we can pick ourselves back up.
Sometimes when we talk about grace, I think about blind Bartimaeus. Always, like, it just comes to my mind. It's like blind Bartimaeus knew that if Jesus Christ would have walked past him, he would have never seen again. He understood that he can't miss the moment. He can't miss that moment. He can't miss that moment where the ever merciful God, the all graceful God, is walking down this path, and he can't miss that moment. I think the ability to change, or the grace to change, is a fleeting moment, and every single one of us have to seize that moment of grace, have to seize that moment of mercy. Because blind Bartimaeus is like, Son of David, have mercy on me. He said the word mercy because he understood Jesus Christ was the most merciful person that he could ever meet.
Full of mercy.
Full of mercy, Darius. Like, he was the most graceful person you could ever meet. Like, he first announced, hey, Son of David, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And we have people around him saying that, hey, shut up, man. He's not all about you. He doesn't care about you. And that, even other people telling him to shut up, it caused him to shout even more. The Bible said he shouted even louder. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus Christ turned. I think that's an exemplification of the mercy of God in a way. Because this dude is blind. And he understood the mercy that Jesus Christ had. And he knew that he couldn't miss the moment. Because if Jesus Christ would have passed him, he probably wouldn't have never seen it again. And he understood the mercy. Sometimes we got to be willing to tap into the mercy of God and seize the moment of grace, the moment of mercy that God is offering us in that regard.
Wow. Something that I really stood out to me when you just said that right now, it was when he cried unto Jesus for grace. That's when he turned. It's like, how do you get God's attention? Ask for forgiveness. Ask for His grace. And he'll say, oh, now your attitude's correct. Let me listen to what you have to say. It's like, it's in that moment. It's like, he's going on his way. But then when you interrupt his day and say, God, have grace and mercy on me and help me be better. It's like at that moment his face turns on you and says, okay, I'm listening. Let's see what I can do. And it's always a matter of like, God's waiting for us to approach Him.
I believe like it starts with your desire. What's your motive behind it, And his desire was, okay, I need this, It was a necessity for him. There's no other way that he could see other than this opportunity. So like, God will wait for you. He won't force you. He's not going to force you to come to Him. He doesn't. That's not what He does. He will wait for you.
I think that's what makes it so hard, because we have to understand that as much as God has given us the free will, that's what makes our life hard. If God would just make things like autonomous, like from an authoritative perspective, He's like, this is how you live your life. You do this, do that, so we know what we're going to do. What makes life so difficult is we have to make certain decisions of our own. And it's our decision to see, like, what attitude am I going to approach the situation? How am I going to approach this decision? What decisions am I going to make today? That's what makes life so hard. And so I completely agree with Darius on that, because like, it is simply how we approach the situation, how we want to look at the situation, what attitude do we have to approach the situation. Because I think some people refuse to change. Me and Scott were talking about this in our drive here. Some people refuse to change because in their change, they build a system around their dysfunction. And building a system around their dysfunction is mainly, in their dysfunction, they get the attention that they need from people.
Right.
They get the eyes. They get people on them. They I'm dysfunctional, like blind Bartimaeus. He's like, okay, I have a cup. I'm swinging my cup left and right. Someone's gonna put your token in there. Someone's gonna put your coin in there. And so no, I'm gonna have my 3-course meal in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening, because somebody's gonna put something in there. Some people build a system around their dysfunction and they refuse to change. But then Jesus Christ steps into the scene, and blind Bartimaeus understood that mercy's walking by. I need to tap into that. And mercy tapped into mercy brought a lot to blind Bartimaeus, and now the cup has to fall, and now the coat has to come off. And because people don't understand that when Jesus Christ steps into the scene, the cup falls and the coat come off, and then you have to change from your old mentality.
Right.
You're not going to get attention from the people
Right.
from the people that gave you all the, oh my
Yeah.
God, pay the party. You're not going to get that attention anymore. So
Yeah.
Jesus Christ sometimes steps in and gives us mercy,
So
but
that he
it
can
just
change.
yeah. And sometimes it disrupts. It disrupts our flow. It disrupts our way of living. Because now we're not begging on the roadside anymore, and our blind Bartimaeus actually have to go clock in and work.
Yeah, he's got to go figure out a new way to live life.
That's basically what it is. Because mercy has a different way, and I think God's mercy is something that's just exemplified in our life every single day,
Every
Wow.
moment, every second.
every breathing, every breath.
You know, I think it's interesting that grace is the thing that draws it. And it's like, okay, but are you going to change now? And it's like, that's the desire that Bartimaeus has. Give me grace so that I can change, so that I can be a better person. I can learn to live life a different way,
Right.
And what is life as a young man, honestly, if it isn't like, let me figure out a better way to live life. Let me figure out the best way to live life,
Yeah.
And what, that's something that, I had so many things that I thought I had figured out. I was like, man, I'm going to build a plan. I'm going to do this and this. And God was just waiting there. He's just like, I've got a better way for you. I'm just waiting for you to ask for it. And then I did. And then he was like, okay, here it is. Here's the plan. What you need to know of it at least. And then I just had to have the humility to ask for that grace to change, so that I had space to change. But like you said, man, the challenge is like, well, now I can't just sit there with my hand out with the cup anymore.
Right.
Now I got to figure out how to clock in. Where do I clock into? Like, you got to learn these things.
It's like you have a new blessing, but you have a limitation that comes with a blessing.
Yeah.
Some blessings comes with limitation. Like, I was getting all the attention. I was getting all my, I have a lot of friends. I had like 3, 4, 5,
Right.
6 friends. When I used to go out and drink, or
Right.
when I used to go out and do all these things, you have people around. But as soon as you got the blessing and the grace and the mercy to change from being an alcoholic or being someone that smokes or whatever the case is, now you lose all those friends. So now your blessing is your limitation.
Yeah. What requires a
It
limitation,
requires
right?
a limitation. So now it's like, okay, I don't have the circle that I had now.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have friends anymore.
Right. But have peace.
I have peace. Come on, Darius.
Wow.
Yes.
But have joy.
You have joy.
Wow.
You have more grace. You have abundance mercy. You have favor. And so sometimes we have to look at mercy in that way, because sometimes mercy brings our blessing. Our blessings require a limitation.
I was thinking about what you just said about how sin is like, because that's what it comes from, right? Missing the mark, right? It's like, well, you went off course somehow. And I was thinking, like, man, grace is that course correction, where it's like, man, you were 1 degree off. Like, you're looking at the bullseye, but you're 1 degree off. But hey, when you're traveling 300 miles, that 1 degree is going to end up you over there in Africa, and you were aiming at Europe. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so it's like grace is that thing that allows you to make a course correction, like halfway through. It's like, man, I started out on this path pretty good. I was coming in hot. I was going a good way, but you were 1 degree off. And so grace is like, all right, now aim back at the bullseye. I'm going to give you the opportunity to think and recalculate your course, and get back in line with the path that you have to walk. And it's like, it's that limitation. It's like, oh, okay, I'm starting to hang out with people I shouldn't be hanging out with. Or, hey, I'm starting to think about these things, these temptations. Like, man, I'm starting to think, man, maybe a drink's not so bad. I'm doing pretty good. Maybe having a drink of beer won't do me any harm. Or maybe smoking that cigarette, maybe that wouldn't kill me. It's like, okay, but that's a degree off course, right?
Wow,
and then so it's like, man, you hit a degree off course and you're like, oh, you still keep following that path down, and it's like, oh, you ended up back where you were going in the first place. And it's like grace is that thing that allows you to make that course correction.
It's like the recalibrator. It recalibrates you back into your compass.
Right.
Like grace is like something that, like now your compass needle is moving all the way to different directions, and grace just basically helps you recalibrate your compass.
Yeah.
I love that.
I remember I went to one of our services, and I don't need to get into any details, but I just remember I had met a girl there. We were just having a conversation.
Oh, you met a girl there.
It wasn't like that.
Uh-oh.
But I just remember having this conversation with her about church and her relationship with Christ, and I could just tell that the way that she lived life was different, and the way that she saw situations was different. And I remember leaving that conversation. I don't remember what we were talking about, but I remember thinking, like, this girl is living on a different planet. Like, she's not seeing life how I see life. And that's sort of what walking by faith and living in grace and learning how to take grace is like. It's like you can perceive a situation, you can perceive your life, but you know that God is going to make up the difference, and you know that God is going to be there to come through when you need him to, and that if you call upon him, he's going to be there.
Wow, that's crazy. Like knowing that God is going to come through, like you said, it actually branches down into the gift of faith as well. So sometimes we know of God, we know that God is powerful, but we don't believe in the power of his authority sometimes, But just starting to believe in the power of God's authority is something that I think is a gift from God as well, because God has to reveal himself to you in many different forms to understand that, hey, he's going to come through. He's going to come through. But I mean, to think about that, though, like I remember when I was 9 years old, I had asthma, and I remember at the age of 9, I was living back in Ghana, and I had an attack for the first time. It was the first time my asthma was very profound. And I see God's grace and God's mercy exemplifying in that very situation so much that I still remember it. And this is age 9. So I'm laying in my bed, I think it was like 1:30 in the morning. I don't really remember. And all of a sudden, there's just difficulty to breathe. Like I'm laying in my bed, and I felt so uneasy. I'm moving around in my bed. I felt so uncomfortable, and I couldn't breathe. I could feel myself not being able to exhale or inhale any type of air. And I went unconscious, according to my mom. I was super unconscious, and I could hear my mom screaming in the background. My dad wasn't around at that time, so I can hear my mom screaming in the other time. And I remember the landlord of the place that we were renting, he pulled his car out in front of my door. My mom rushed me into the car. We went into the hospital, and the doctor was like, if they did not bring me at the time that they brought me there at the hospital, I would have lost my life. And I remember in the car, I could hear myself. I could feel that, okay, am I losing my life? I was so fearful of death. But then I came out successful in that moment. And it was so impressionate on my mind that I still remember that moment at the age of 9.
Wow.
And that was my first real attack with asthma. It's not fun. You can't breathe. Like there's no flow of oxygen into your lungs to a point where your body sometimes starts to seize. Like your oxygen is not being distributed to all the organs in your body. And so now your body goes into shock. So now I'm in the hospital bed, like all these IVs going in, and I can always remember. I can remember my mom standing right there praying for me, and God always draws me back to it every single time. That was my grace, Kenneth. That was my love, and I always draw out of that to know that God has so much for me because He saved me at that very moment. And there's so many instances that I can expound on, but that's one of the stories I hit him at a very, very young age. David. And that was not the only time. There's so many stories that I could think about.
Wow, that's intense. When you're staring death down the barrel, and then suddenly death is snatched from you, and you're like, wow, I'm alive still. How? That's where God really reveals Himself, Absolutely. And God is like, I am life, and then you're like, oh, I like that better than death. that's certainly preferable. I was thinking about some of the times that something very similar happened to me, and. Through my own foolishness, though, it wasn't something that, it was just through my idiocy. God saves me from myself so many times. And I was thinking about one time I was cutting a branch off of a tree, and it sounds so silly, but it was a big branch. I mean, it was bigger around than a man is, and it was a dead branch. So I was like, I got to remove this tree. I was at my grandma's, and I wanted to help her out, get rid of this dead branch, and I didn't know how to do that yet. And so I took an electric chainsaw, when it plugs into the wall, when it plugs into the wall, up on top of a 12-foot ladder, at the very top rung of a 12-foot ladder. And I was cutting this branch because I was going to get it done one way or another. And I was like trying to calculate it, and I was like, I think I know how this is going to fall. And I was really confident. You know how you get real confident in your stupidity?
Yeah, you got all the geometry and the trigonometry figured out.
Like, I know how this is going to work. And then I remember I cut it, and I just had this feeling like, you should stop cutting and walk away from this now. And I was like, nah, I'm going to finish it off. It'll be good. And then I put pressure on the chainsaw, and I heard this. And I'm like looking around, I'm like, oh, I think it's going to come. And then just in the blink of an eye, I see the branch coming towards me. It's rolling towards me on the ladder. And then I'm about to feel the vibration of the impact. I throw the chainsaw forward, because Mama didn't raise no fool. I throw the chainsaw forward, and I like jump backwards. And as I'm jumping backwards, that branch comes through and it crushes the ladder. It hits from the top and smashes it all the way to down. The ladder's splintering in pieces. This is a fiberglass ladder. And I kind of jump backwards and let the inertia take me, and I'm like laying there on the floor stunned. Perfectly fine. I mean, my wrist was a little sore. I had a couple bruises, but I like stood up, and I was like, wow, I almost was just under that thing. I almost just broke my legs or died. And I just kind of was stunned for a minute. I went inside, talked to my grandma, like, hey, I broke your ladder. But it was in that moment, I was really shocked for a few weeks. Because I'm like, I could have died there.
Yeah.
And God put his grace on me. I saw God in that moment. God said, I'm not going to
God.
let you die. I'm going to push you away from that thing.
My
you know?
God, my God.
And I was like, wow. And I have many more stories like that, which is me being dumb. And God's like, I'm going to snatch you out of that real quick because I have things for you to do. I have a person for you to be.
My God.
And I'm going to not let your idiocy destroy you.
My God. It's crazy because once you say that, I could think about something that happened to me possibly about 6 months ago. So my mom comes over, okay, we're cooking. I'm not cooking per se, but she's the one that's cooking. I'm in my bedroom, I'm hanging out. I don't know what I was probably watching something on TV. And my mom was cooking with grease, so like she turned on the stove, the pan got super hot. And so she's like, you know what, the pan is too hot, so I'm just going to take it and put it in the sink. But one thing that she forgot to do is the faucet was not turned off all the way. So there was just these tiny drops coming from the faucet. So this hot pan, drops of water.
Oh, no.
It's the pan. It inflames. Now there's grease on fire. So I'm in my for her first impression, her first instinct was, I'm gonna handle this. It's gonna be okay. Then the flame starts going up, and then I hear the carbon monoxide beat is beeping. Beep, beep, beep. I'm in my room. It's like my mom starts calling me by my middle name, Kwame, Kwame, Kwame. I'm like, Mom, what's going on? I walk into the kitchen, and there's flames, bro, in the sink, like massive flames, and I can't think about it. Now it's like adrenaline. I'm thinking like, God, what am I doing? There's smoke all over in the living room, in the kitchen, in the dining room. There's smoke all over the place. And we live in an apartment. So I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? So first thing I think about is, okay, Mom, slide the patio door. My mom slides the patio door. That pushes the blinds to the side. I grab the pan with the flames in the sink because now there are cabinets over a sink. The cabinets is catching fire. And so now it's just the point of no return to a certain extent. Yeah. I grabbed the pan, I ran across my living room, and this grease is on fire. So the grease spilled all over my hand and my legs. And so I tossed the pan over the patio, over the patio, like outside. And, I mean, in the moment, I can think about it. I can think about the fact that I could have just grabbed a towel, soaked the towel up with some water, and threw it over the flame or something. I couldn't think about it because it's adrenaline. I was sleeping, and then now I hear screams. It's like, oh, what do I do? So, but in that moment, I understood that God's grace was just so at play in that moment because a lot could have happened. A lot could have happened. I just walked away with a few bruises. I put some CBD cream on it, and it worked out. But God's grace is just, it is something that's super, super amazing. And we need to be grateful for that. We really need to.
I think so, man. And it's in those moments where we are going to die, right? We're about to die, or we're about to screw up, or through our fault or through somebody else's fault. And God just shows his love and his mercy towards us. And he's like, no, don't worry about it. I got you. And, if I trust anybody with my back, it's God. You know what I mean? Like, I trust you guys. I do. But I trust God more.
Absolutely.
Because he sees the whole picture.
I got limitations, man.
Yeah, we've got limitations. Yeah. And I was thinking, it's not... There's another time in my life that I really screwed up, and it messed me up for years, man. I picked up smoking. I picked up smoking cigarettes because, I don't know, I just wanted to. And I got so addicted, and it was destroying my health so much for so many years. But I was so locked into this mindset of like, I'm just always going to be a smoker now. I'm always going to be living this life because I'm addicted now. What can I do? I grew the receptors. So I'm locked in this mindset. And God separates me away for a while. And, begins to change my life. And when the day that I stepped out in faith and I said, God, I want to be what you have for me to be. I don't want to be who I'm limiting myself to be. I don't want to be trapped in my own foolish mistakes. I don't want to be trapped in this life anymore. God began to move in me, and he said, are you serious? Then put those cigarettes down. You can't serve two masters. Put that tobacco down. You can't serve two masters.
Oh my God.
And in that moment, I made a choice. And God tested that choice a few times, still testing it sometimes. And I said, no, I don't want to serve this anymore. I want to serve you, God. And God's grace came over me in a way, and he gave me the strength to resist it. He reached in and reached into the depth of my being and said, I'll take this from you if you're serious about giving it up. And I said, I'm serious, God. I don't want this anymore. And the grace of God gave me the ability to rise up from that limitation that I put on myself, the health limitation, the mental limitation, the slavery that I put myself in. And God said, I'll break that yoke. And he broke it. And you guys have never seen me smoke a cigarette. I've never smoked a cigarette since that moment. I've never put tobacco in my system in that moment, since that moment. And God took that from me. And because I committed myself to him, and I said, God, give me your grace so that I can be better. Give me your grace so that I can be your son. Give me your grace so that I can be your servant, your child. And God's grace poured over me in that moment. And he took it. And he said, I don't even see that guy anymore. It's under the blood. I don't even see him. I see who I want my son to be. And in that moment, God drew out my potential, and he began to grow me to be somebody that he designed for me to be in the first place. And I think that encapsulates the grace of God, is where he gives us, he says, I'll let you course correct. You want to course correct? You asked me if you could course correct? I'll forgive you. I'll forgive everything you did so that you can turn around and you can be who I made you to be. That is the grace of God right there.
Wow, I also think God allows us to practice in certain things that will not bring too much detriment to us for the game, for the real game. It's like if you're playing a soccer game or football game, you go into the training field and you train and you practice, you do all your drills for the day, for when the day comes. So whatever you went through, sometimes God uses those things as your story. He uses that story to impact people. Like your story, the story that you just shared right now is something that impacted me. Because if you hadn't shared that with me, I never would have known. Because you're a pretty stand-up guy. You're very articulate. Your enunciation of certain words, like you're a very witty person. One of the wittiest people that I know. And so if you hadn't shared that story, I never would have known. And so if you sharing that as something that's going to impact, so sometimes God uses our story. God uses our story to impact others. We got people like Scott, we got Darius, we got Christian, we got myself in here that have so much stories that will impact lives. And sometimes God uses that sometimes. And I also think God uses his grace to stop us from going in situations that would hurt us.
Yes.
Because I have never had the appetite to taste liquor. Never. And I think that's the grace of God. Yeah. I think so, because God, it's like, why have I never had the appetite to smoke, the appetite to taste liquor? And I think that's God's grace stopping me from those things. Because then anything can come in if I didn't have God's grace and mercy. Because it's by his grace that he's my refuge. It's by his grace that he's my protector. It's by his grace that he's the one that cares for me. It's by his grace. It's by his sovereignty and his providence. Yeah. So the reason why I don't have an appetite for liquor and smoking is because he's granted me the grace not to have to edge for those things. And sometimes I look at it in that perspective. I'm like, God, thank you for your mercy and your grace. That I don't have the appetite for these things. Like, I'll hang out with people that I don't advise anyone to hang around people that drink, smoke, or anything like that. Because, you're obviously the people you hang out with is going to influence your attitude and your behavior. So you can't just say, oh, wait, I want a guy that doesn't drink, but then you go out and hang out in a bar. Like, come on, dude. Like, if you want to date a guy that doesn't drink, you don't go to the bar to go find a dude. You know what I'm saying? But still the same, I'm just appreciative of the mercy and the grace of God to stop me from having the appetite for certain things that it's not that's not going to be pleasing to him in that regard.
Kenny, I was thinking what you were saying at the beginning of your talk about how after David shared his testimony, you look at him and you would not think that. And I think that's sort of another aspect of grace. Like, not only am I taking this thing from you, but when people see you, they're not going to see your past.
It's not recognizable.
All they're going to see is you. We're walking towards that a little bit closer each and every day. Each and every time we make a decision. Whether we're putting down a cigarette, putting down a bottle, putting down pornography, whatever that might be. Each time we make that choice, we look a little bit more like him.
We think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the fire. What does the Bible say? They came out of the fire, and there was not any sign of smoke or burn on their material. And so I look at David, I'm like, what, you? Right. Cigarettes? What? Stop it. Stop lying to me. Right. Like, there's no sign of it. I can't no, it's not recognizable.
No,
God does that. It's grace, man. Presence.
I think, and that's it. It's God removes it from us completely. It's not like, I'm a recovering tobacco addict. No, it's gone. Like, no, I'm not going to lie. There are still times where I'll smell and I'll be like, I missed that. But then I like get over myself and I'm like, I don't miss being a slave.
Right.
And then suddenly I want to vomit because that smells just so awful to me all of a sudden. And I'm just like, oh, it's that temptation comes. It's like, hey, miss me? And I'm like, no, I like being able to breathe. And, you know, and it's those moments where God shows his grace on us, removes it from us. Why? So his presence can be manifested in our lives. And so that how can his presence be manifested if you smell like tobacco smoke? Now, I want to say, you know, I've met some people who, they're walking in the grace of God, they're walking in the will of God, and God manifests his presence through them, and they do smell like tobacco smoke. I've met people like that. However, if your spirit precedes you, and if there's something in your spirit that is, it's imperfect. We're all imperfect. But if there's something that has a hold on you, that has a yoke of slavery on you, he's going to be a gentleman. He's going to say, you know what, I'm not going to override this person's ability to be that person or do that thing. But he is waiting to manifest his presence even greater. And he says, I want to show myself through you, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait for you to be ready to get rid of this thing, Jesus said, I want to show my presence through Bartimaeus. I want to show my glory through him. I want him to be lifted up as my son. But he had to wait for Bartimaeus to say, hey, Jesus, hey, don't forget me. Hey, your mercy, son of David, your mercy. And Jesus says, oh, I was waiting for that. And he says, okay, you're not blind anymore.
Yeah, we also need to understand that, like, whoever the Son sets free is free indeed. Understanding that perspective is something that we need to drill into our mind as well. Like, whoever the Son sets free is free indeed. So if you think you're set free from something and you went back to it, were you really set free from it? Something we could think about. But still the same, on understanding that there's a psychology and there's a biology behind how our brain creates neural pathways for certain habits that we pick up. And sometimes those neural pathways are so strong that it's so hard to break.
Yeah.
That sometimes just entering into a room can instigate that pathway to firing off. Sometimes hearing a smell can instigate that pathway to be firing off. Sometimes seeing something can instigate those pathways. But the only way to change that pathway is to build new pathways.
Yeah.
Building new pathways by hanging out with friends that are not doing the habit that you're trying to break away from. Building new pathways by building new habits. And so, yes, God sets us free, but we need to understand that there's a constant transformation that needs to happen, right? Like, we have to constantly renew our mind. There's a constant renewal of our mind that needs to happen Okay, yeah, you're not smoking anymore? Yeah, sure, but someone is going to walk by with a pack of cigarettes. You want a pack of cigarettes? Someone can offer that to you.
Yeah.
You have to constantly renew your mind in that situation. It's something that you have to do daily. It's not like, okay, I had a God moment at a specific time, and I'm just gonna live in that moment. No, you gotta live in that God moment every single day. Constant renewal, constant transformation. Yeah. So whoever the Son sets free, it is free indeed.
I really like how you mentioned blind Bartimaeus, and I was just thinking about this idea that he's blind. And like, how many of us, especially, teenagers, early 20s, going into 30s, it's like we feel like we don't have any clarity, any direction.
Right.
What should we do in those moments? You cried out to God for grace to be able to see.
That is pretty profound.
That hits. That slaps.
I have to think about it for a minute, because I remember there are moments like this that I've been praying for. I know Scott has expressed to me a few times that, like, at some point he was praying to have brothers that has the same belief as he does, like brothers that has the same vision that he has. Like, he's been praying for it, and I could say the same thing.
Me as well.
I've been praying for moments like this. How many times I'm like, man, I wish I had some people to express my thoughts with. There's something so strong about men together, like trying to work in the direction of where God wants them to be. There's so much power that comes with that. And God grants us the grace to have these moments. God grants us the mercy to have what we prayed for at some point.
I think it's interesting, though, is that before you can enter into that moment, God's grace has to take you out of what you were in before. You know what I mean? Like, I could have come to you guys, and I could still be addicted to tobacco, but it wouldn't be the same. Christian could come to us, and he could still be under the things that had his mind in a yoke, but it wouldn't be the same. Darius could come in, and he could still be in, the mindset that he was in before, but it wouldn't be the same. Kenny could come in smelling like the world, and it wouldn't be the same anymore. And we look at that, and we're like, God had to take us from something first. Before he could start building, God had to shine his grace. He waited for us, actually. He was waiting for us the entire time. God is very patient. And he says, no, I'm willing to give my grace. I'm willing that none should perish. What does that mean? Perish, death, die. You're killing yourself. I'm willing that you stop killing yourself, and I will help you with that. But you got to be willing. You got to cry to me first. He's waiting for you to do so, because he's only going to do something if you ask. Jesus says you have not because you ask not.
Yeah.
So God's like, well, I'm waiting. If you ask me to do it and you're serious about it and you're ready to repent, what does repent mean? Turn 180 degrees and walk away from it. Like, I want to actually stop doing this thing. When God knows when you're actually ready to do that. Like you said, it's like, were you really set free? It's like, well, were you actually repented of it? Like, did you actually want to change, or was it just a momentary sorrow? Or were you actually ready to change your life? And when you are ready to change your life, God's like, don't worry, I'll change it completely. You won't even recognize it. It'll be so good.
Absolutely. I also think sometimes we need to understand that nobody is exempt from the results of the decisions that they make. Nobody is.
Yeah.
Like, it's because sometimes we think, oh, God saved me, so every single repercussion of decisions I've made in the past should also be saved. No. It doesn't happen. If you have sex with a girl and the sperm meets the egg, a baby's gonna form. It's a principle that He's laid out a long time ago. So if you're like, all right, God, I've done this, I've done that, but can you please make sure this doesn't happen? Well, it's a principle He's already set. If this happened, that's gonna happen. So there are outcomes that of the decisions that we make that we need to understand that we're not exempt from.
Yeah.
Like if I made a bad decision, sometimes I have to man up and face those decisions. Face those decisions, but make better decisions. Use that, like the wisdom piece we talked about last week. Use that wisdom that you gain from that experience, apply it into future adventures. If you don't really do, then that's the aspect that Darius said. It's foolishness in that aspect. So I think no one is exempt from the repercussions of the bad decisions that we make at all.
That just made me think about God's 10 commandments just now, and He has commandments that we should obey by. And if we don't obey by those commandments, then there are results that come after those. And it's like, you want God to lead you, or you want to lead yourself. And you have to kind of compare the two. Like, okay, which one will take me to heaven? My way or His way?
Wow.
Which way leads to life?
Yeah, which way leads to life? And it's like, okay, I'll try to do it my way. I have these goals, I have these dreams, I have these aspirations, but that's not the will of God for your life.
And to jump off of that, it's like, well, why would that matter? Why would I want to follow the will of God? Well, no, in my case, do you like breathing? How do you feel about air? In Kenny's case, how do you feel about air?
I want to breathe, right? Because I had an asthmatic attack, and I want everybody to have the ability to breathe.
Right, yeah.
I'm thinking about just like how both of your testimonies, yours was with your breathing, your asthma, and yours was with the smoking. That it has a lot to do with like the way you breathe. And when you wake up, that's the first I'm breathing. Like thank you God for my breath. And when you don't have that, you have like a heaviness on your lungs. And I'm just thinking about like spiritually, it can cause a spirit of heaviness on you, and you just like wondering, and you can't get His light. You can't get His life.
Wow. I think a lot of times people forget the mercy of God that's so much in abundance, in a form that they're always sulk in what other people did to them, that they don't look up to the grace, because they know that if they tap into the grace of God, they're going to have to be graceful to the people that hurt them. And so a lot of people don't tap into that aspect because they're like, because I just want to stay bitter. I want to stay incapacitated.
We can talk a couple hours about that.
I mean, we can expound on this in our previous episodes, but it's like, oh my God, this is something that we need to really talk about.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it's, grace is it's that thing that pulls us out of wherever we are. God covers us and says, I'm going to put you where I want you to be. I'm going to course correct you. I'm going to put you on that bullseye again. I'm going to make you be who I need you to be, who I made you to be, you individually. And we're going to push yourself out of the side. And that's our job, right? We got to push ourselves out of the side and be like, you know what? I don't want to be a slave to my own desires anymore. I don't want to be a slave to any of these things anymore.
It's in that process that God not only changes the way that we act, but He changes the way that we look. And it's those things, those daily habits that we develop, that it's, how do I put this?
It's gradual growth.
It's like when you're going to the bar and you're drinking every day. It's like it's gonna show in your face. It's gonna show in your eyes. It's gonna show in your demeanor and the way that you walk and the way that you carry yourself.
Smell.
And the way that you're able to work out and the way that you're able to learn. And when you stop doing those things and he corrects your past and he gives you different things to do, those natural habits that you're already doing on a daily basis, those are the things that help change us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, we're so glad that you could join us for this discussion. I hope this ministered to you. I know it ministered to me. We're really excited to have you along for the ride, and we hope you join us for next episode where hopefully God's grace will show a little more. Have a wonderful week. Be blessed.